I used to think I knew what love looked like. I used to think it meant showing up, making dinner, sharing a bed. But lately, love feels like silence between bites. Like a kiss that tastes like habit. Like reaching for someone who doesn't reach back. And then, just when I thought I couldn't feel any more alone, I looked out the window and saw my son kissing my best friend's daughter like she was the only thing that ever mattered. And I realized, I used to be someone's everything too. My name is Claire. I'm 43 years old, and I used to think I knew my family, my home, inside and out. But these days, I walk into the kitchen and I don't recognize the woman standing at the stove. She wears my robe. She makes my coffee. She smiles politely at her husband. But she isn't me. Not really. I've always been the kind of woman who felt things deeply. I used to say it was a strength that I could see through people, sense when something was wrong before they said a word. But now I'm not so sure. Maybe I see too much. Maybe I feel too much. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending I don't feel anything at all. The day I found out about my son and her daughter, well, that came later. But the truth is, things had been unraveling long before then. Quietly. Subtly. Like a string coming loose in your favorite sweater. You don't notice it at first. Not until it snags on something and pulls half the sleeve off. I've been married to David for 18 years. We met in college. He used to sneak me flowers between lectures, take me on midnight walks just to look at streetlights. There was magic then, slow, soft, patient magic. He used to cut my face when he kissed me like I was something fragile and rare. Now he kisses me when he walks in the door, the kind of kiss that's habitual, not tender. Lips brush mine with a faint trace of coffee and obligation. Last week, I leaned into it, hoping for something more, something real. But he was already turning away, muttering about meetings and dinner plans. We cuddle, sometimes. Or something like it. I'll lie down beside him on the couch, his arm looping around my shoulder. But it feels like he's holding the memory of me, not who I am now. Sometimes I want to shift my body against his, find that rhythm we used to share in silence. But then I hear him sigh. Or check his phone. And the heat between us fades before it ever sparks. I used to blame myself. Maybe I wasn't adventurous enough. Maybe I let the years change my body too much. But then I started to realize something that hurt far more. It wasn't just about sex. It was about being seen. Really seen. And I didn't feel seen anymore. Not by him. Not by anyone. The last time he touched me like he meant it, we were on vacation in Santa Fe. It was 2 years ago. We'd rented a cabin, just the two of us. One night, he traced his fingers down my spine as we lay in bed, slow, purposeful. I remember gasping, not from pleasure, but surprise. I whispered his name. He didn't say anything back. He just pulled me to him and kissed me like we still had time. I keep thinking about that night, holding it up against every moment since, wondering when things started to change. Was it after I started working more? After Ben, our son, went off to college and the house went too quiet? Or maybe it was long before that, and I just didn't want to see it. But I remember the exact moment I knew something inside us had shifted. It was a Tuesday. Just an ordinary Tuesday. David came home, tossed his keys on the counter, and wrapped his arms around me from behind. I was chopping carrots. He kissed my neck, warm and familiar. And I smiled. But then I caught my own reflection in the microwave door, and the smile didn't reach my eyes. My body was still, my shoulders tight, my hands shaking ever so slightly around the knife. I looked like someone being held, but not held onto. That was when it hit me. We were still going through the motions, dinners, holidays, morning coffee. But the soul of our marriage? It had already gone somewhere quiet to die. And I hadn't even noticed. It's strange how someone can touch you every day and still not reach you. David's always been a hands-on kind of man. His love language has always leaned physical, brushing my hair back when I'm reading, placing his hand low on my back when we walk through a crowd, tugging me close while we're lying in bed, even when I'm already facing the edge. And I used to love that. I used to lean into it, feel safe in it. But lately, his touch makes me feel displaced. Like he's trying to skip a step I haven't caught up to emotionally. Last night was a perfect example. I was sitting at the table grading essays. I'm a high school literature teacher. Irony never escapes me. David walked in still in his scrubs. He's a trauma nurse, always rushing from one crisis to the next, and leaned down to kiss my cheek. It was sweet, casual. His stubble scratched the edge of my jaw, but I didn't flinch. Not outwardly. Inside, though, something seized. A tight coil of resistance I didn't even understand. He slid a takeout container across the table and said, "Got your favorite." His smile was tired, but hopeful. Like he was offering peace, or maybe connection. I nodded, grateful but distracted. And then he walked around the table and slipped his hands under my shirt. Just the small of my back. Just skin against skin. But it felt too soon. Too intimate, too fast, like trying to kiss in the middle of a sentence. I stiffened. Not dramatically, but enough for him to notice. He pulled back, stood there a beat too long, then said, "You okay?" I smiled. "Yeah, just, long day." 30 juniors tried to convince me The Great Gatsby was boring and that Daisy was misunderstood. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He sat across from me, tapping his fork against the container. I felt him watching me, probably trying to read the cues I wasn't sure I was giving. See, the thing is, David thinks touching me is connecting. That his hand on my thigh or his kiss on my shoulder should bridge every gap. But I need something else. Words. Presence. Space to be heard, not just held. And every time I try to say that, it sounds petty. Ungrateful. I mean, how do you tell a man who works 12-hour shifts in a trauma unit that his affection feels like pressure? How do you look at the man who held your hand through childbirth and say, "I need you to stop touching me long enough to listen"? So instead, I eat my noodles and ask him about his shift. He tells me about a drunk driving case, a 19-year-old who wrapped her car around a pole and still walked away. I listen, nod, ask the right questions. But when he reaches for my hand across the table, I hesitate half a second too long. And in that pause, something cracks between us. He drops his eyes, lets go of my fingers, and quietly excuses himself to shower. I sit there, alone with lukewarm noodles and 1,000 things I'll never say. Later that night, I go into the laundry room to start a load, and I find one of Ben's hoodies in the basket. It still smells like his cologne. He's been home more lately, says he likes the quiet after classes. But there's something else in his face, some barely contained excitement he's not ready to name. I haven't told David yet, but I saw them. Ben and Lila. My best friend Sharon's daughter. It was 2 Saturdays ago. I was pulling into the parking lot behind the community center, and they were there, tucked behind the dumpster, laughing like kids in love. Her fingers tangled in his curls. His hand grazing her waist. I didn't confront them. I just sat in my car, heart pounding. They looked so young. So sure. And something about the way he looked at her, like she was sunlight, made my throat tighten. I used to be looked at like that. Lately, I've started counting the seconds before I flinch. It's not always dramatic, not some movie-worthy recoil or angry push. Sometimes it's just a pause. A breath. A subtle pull of my shoulder when David wraps his arm around me at night. Or the way I tense when his hand drifts too low while we're standing at the sink, rinsing dishes together. He means well. I know he does. But I feel like I'm slowly becoming allergic to his love. This morning, he came up behind me while I was brushing my hair. I stood in front of the mirror, tugging a wide-toothed comb through damp strands, still wearing my robe. He kissed my neck, soft, familiar, and murmured, "You smell like honey again." I smiled. It's that new conditioner. He slid his arms around my waist and pressed his body into mine, resting his chin on my shoulder. I stood there, still as glass. He didn't notice. Or maybe he chose not to. His hands moved across my stomach, fingertips grazing skin that once tingled under his touch. But now, all I felt was restraint. Not from him. From me. And it's not that I don't want him. Or love him. I do. Or at least, I think I still do. It's just that everything between us feels forced. Like our rhythm is off, the melody buried under static. Last week, he slapped my butt when I bent over to pull towels from the dryer. It used to make me laugh, even blush a little. But this time, I turned around too fast and said, "Could you not?" His face twisted in confusion. "Sorry. You thought I was still 28 and flirty," I snapped. He didn't reply. Just walked away. I stood there holding a damp towel, suddenly wishing I could rewind 5 seconds and soften my tone. But I couldn't. Because that's what frustration does, it steals your grace. Later that night, we kissed before bed. Or at least, our mouths touched. His lips were warm. Mine were still. I tried to respond, to feel something. Anything. But it felt more like saying goodnight to a stranger than to my husband. And I hate myself for it. Because the truth is I miss him. I miss us. But every time he reaches for me, I find myself recoiling, even though I want him. That's the part no one talks about. The shame of desiring intimacy but dreading the effort it now takes to get there. I don't know when we became this. When every touch started feeling like a question I didn't have the answer to. I wish he'd ask me how I'm doing. Really doing. I wish he'd stop assuming my body is the only way in. Because it's not sex I'm resisting. It's the loneliness that comes after it happened over pasta. Homemade. Even the kind David used to beg for when we were newly married. I'd pulled out the old recipe, the one scribbled in the margins of my grandmother's cookbook, because I thought maybe food could bring us back together. I lit a candle. Just one. Nothing fancy. I wasn't trying to seduce him, I was just trying to remind us of something softer. Ben was out with friends. Or so I thought. David walked in still in his scrubs, shoes muddy, face exhausted. He looked at the table, the candle, the plates I'd actually set instead of letting us eat in front of the TV. He smiled. "What's the occasion?" I gave a small shrug. Just wanted something quiet. Just us. He leaned down, kissed my temple, and for a moment, I almost believed it could work. That maybe we just needed to sit down, breathe, eat something warm together. But then, 15 minutes into the meal, I saw Ben's car pull into the driveway. He wasn't alone. Lila. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. They didn't come inside. I watched from the kitchen window as they sat in his car, laughing, their hands brushing too long to be innocent. Her head rested on his shoulder. His thumb traced circles on her leg. I should have looked away. But I couldn't. David was talking, something about a coworker, maybe a patient. I wasn't hearing a word. All I could think was, they're just kids. And they look more connected than we do. He must have noticed my face, because he stopped mid-sentence. "Claire? You okay?" I blinked and turned back. "Yeah. Sorry. Just thought I saw something outside." "You've been weird all week," he said, setting down his fork. "Did I miss something? Is this about the other night?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was tight with something too big to name. David reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Talk to me. Please." I pulled away. And then it all came out. "I don't want to be touched just because you're home." His eyes narrowed. "Claire, no, listen to me. You come in, kiss my neck, grab my waist, slide your hand under my shirt like it's automatic. Like that's the only way we know how to be close anymore. I'm more than my skin, David. And I feel invisible." He stared at me stunned. Like I'd spoken in a language he'd never heard before. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "I try. I bring you dinner, I kiss you, I hold you at night, you hold me like I'm furniture," I snapped, voice shaking. "You don't ask me how I am. You don't notice when I'm shutting down." His jaw clenched. "You never say anything, Claire. You just pull away. Because I don't know how to say it without hurting you." My voice cracked on that last word, and suddenly the tears came fast and hot. "And I don't want to hurt you. I just want to feel close to you again. I want to stop pretending." We sat there in silence. Candle flickering between us like some cheap symbol of warmth that neither of us felt anymore. Then he stood up and walked toward the sink. His back to me. "You think I haven't noticed?" he said softly. "I miss you too. But you shut me out before I even get the chance." I wanted to say he was wrong. That I'd been open, that I'd tried. But part of me knew he was right. I'd been distant. Guarded. And maybe not just because of him, maybe because I was afraid. Afraid that if I let him in, he'd see how empty I felt. How lonely. How jealous I was of two teenagers in the driveway who didn't have 18 years of miscommunication hanging between them. After he went upstairs, I stood at the sink and scrubbed a clean plate like it had wronged me. Then I looked out the window again. Ben and Lila were gone. But the ache stayed. It's been 12 days since the pasta. 12 days since I cried in front of David for the first time in years. Since I let the words tumble out, messy and raw, and watched him stand there with nothing to offer back but quiet confusion. Since then, we've existed like ghosts under the same roof. He still makes the coffee. I still fold the laundry. We still ask each other if we need anything from the store, like we're neighbors sharing a fence instead of a bed. What's worse is that we're polite. Painfully polite. Every thank you and sure, no problem feels like a plaster wall over a collapsed foundation. The space between us isn't loud. It's silent. Careful. Fragile. And yet, I keep watching him when he's not looking. When he sits on the edge of the bed, rubbing the back of his neck. When he zones out during dinner, fork paused midair. When he pulls his blanket up at night, not over me, just himself, and turns to face the wall. He's hurting too. I can see it now. I can feel it in his stillness. I think I assumed he didn't notice. That the disconnect was one-sided. But the truth is, he's been living in this fog just like I have. Maybe he didn't have the words for it either. Maybe he's been afraid to say them out loud. Last night, I found one of his old hoodies in the laundry, the one with the little rip in the sleeve he always meant to sew. I buried my face in it and cried like it belonged to someone I used to love. And maybe it does. Maybe we've both become people the other doesn't quite recognize anymore. And then there's Ben. He's been coming home later and later, face glowing in that way people glow when they're in love for the first time. I asked him who he's seeing, already knowing. He just smiled and said, "It's still early, Mom." He has no idea I saw them. Or maybe he does, and he's just waiting for me to name it. I haven't told Sharon either. I haven't spoken to her in weeks. I don't know what I'm afraid of, that she'll be angry? Or worse, thrilled? That she'll say, "Oh, I always hoped they'd end up together," and I'll feel left behind all over again. There's something about seeing your child fall in love while you're quietly watching your own marriage dissolve. It stings. Not in a bitter way, but in a sad, aching kind of way. Like looking at a version of yourself you don't remember how to be. Tonight, David asked if I wanted to watch a movie. Just casually, while he loaded the dishwasher. I said maybe. He nodded. Didn't push. And I stood there wondering if maybe is a start or a goodbye waiting to happen. Part of me wants to crawl into his lap like I used to. Lay my head on his chest and ask if he still remembers the way I used to laugh with my whole body. Ask him if he still sees me, even now. But I'm afraid. Afraid that reaching for him will remind us both how far we've drifted. And yet, I also don't want to keep living like this. So tonight, before I go to bed, I think I'll sit beside him. Just sit. No fixing. No talking. Just presence. If he reaches for my hand, maybe I'll let him take it. And if he doesn't, maybe that's an answer too. He was already on the couch when I came downstairs. Legs stretched out, remote in hand, wearing that old navy t-shirt I've secretly always loved, soft and worn thin in all the places time touches. The TV glowed, but the volume was low. One of those crime dramas he half watches after long days. I didn't say anything. Just walked over, sat beside him, knees pulled up under me like I used to. He didn't flinch. Didn't shift away. But he didn't reach for me either. I think we were both afraid to make the first move. Like even kindness had become a negotiation. A commercial came on. He turned toward me cautiously. "I don't want to keep pretending," he said. I swallowed hard. Me neither. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't know when we started drifting. I kept trying to fix it by touching you. I thought maybe if I reached for your body, the rest would follow." I closed my eyes. I needed you to reach for my heart first. He nodded slowly, pain flickering behind his eyes. We sat in that truth for a long moment, the weight of what we hadn't said pressing between us like a third person in the room. Then he whispered, "Can I just hold your hand?" "That's it. Just your hand." I nodded. He reached out slowly, like I might break. Our fingers touched, unsure at first, then curling together with a kind of familiarity that felt like mourning and comfort at the same time. I didn't lean into him. He didn't pull me close. But that small touch, warm, steady, felt like a new kind of intimacy. Not the kind that tries to fix everything in one night. Just the kind that says, I still care. I'm still here. When I went upstairs later, he didn't follow. He stayed on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. But before I reached the top step, I heard him whisper, "Good night, Claire." And for the first time in weeks, I whispered back, "Good night, David."